All right. So if you don't want to be on the recording, you can go ahead and turn off your video, and that's on the bottom left. You can just click on stop video if you're not comfortable being on that. And we do that because
Unless you're on an iPad.
right. Unless you're on an iPad, then it's in a different spot, right? Yeah. So, and that's because we like to be able to offer these to whoever can't attend at a later point, because all of these talks are getting a lot of attention from people who want to know more about our whales. Also, I think most of you have already done it, but if you haven't changed your name to your kiddo's name or who is going to be the participant today, go ahead and do that now by clicking on the 3 little dots and then clicking on rename so that we know who we're talking to when you have a question. And without further ado, I want to introduce Dr. Giles. She is a scientist, lecturer, and killer whale researcher who's worked for the southern resident orca population in many ways. She has been involved with Wild Orca, a nonprofit whose mission is to save the southern resident population. She works for the Orca, oh, sorry, I'm going off the wrong one. Let me start again.
It's okay.
First and foremost, she works for the Center of Conservation Biology at the University of Washington, and she's a lecturer at the University of Washington Friday Harbor Labs. And she is the science and research director at Wild Orca, who we just talked about. And she also works with the Orca Salmon Alliance, Sailor Sea Ecosystem Advocates, Killer Whale Tales, and the reason you're all here today is to hear about her work for the UW's Conservation Canines. So please welcome Dr. Giles.
This is so exciting. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you all for popping in. So I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. I have a lot of slides with a lot of photos. I'll go through it pretty quickly so that there's a lot of time at the end to ask questions. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. So thank you so much for the introduction. Yeah, I'm so fortunate to get to wear a lot of different hats and be a participant in a lot of different things related to southern residents. I fell in love with southern residents when I was 18, but I had this thought in my head since I was 6 that I wanted to work for killer whales. I didn't know how or even really what a killer whale was, but I must have been seeing them in books from the library because I've always had it in my thoughts that these black and white whales were the creature on the planet that I wanted to study. So I found myself up here in the Pacific Northwest again when I was 18, which was more than 3 decades ago, crazy, more than 30 years ago. And I specifically wanted to study the fish-eating killer whales that occur here. We are really fortunate in Washington State and the Pacific Northwest to have 3 ecotypes or 3 different types of killer whales that live here. The fish eaters, which you see here at the top, the mammal eaters, which are in the middle, also called Biggs killer whales, as in honor of the first man to ever study these whales, Mike Bigg. And then the bottom ones, which we don't get to see here very much, are called offshores. And these guys are known for eating sharks. But we now know from some colleagues that work for the federal government that these guys also eat fish. And sometimes, you come back later. They also eat fish. So we can talk about the difference between those ecotypes later if anybody's interested. So the southern resident fish-eating killer whales, or orca whales, have a really wide territory. They go all the way down to Monterey, California, down there at the bottom, that white dot at the bottom. And they go all the way up at least to the top of Vancouver Island. And oh, wow, check that out. Somebody else can draw on the screen. That's awesome. I'm learning so much. Thank you, whoever did that, to highlight that for me. And then all the way up to, really, J-Pod was seen in Southeast Alaska one time in 2007. But generally speaking, the southern resident fish-eating whales go up to about the top of Vancouver Island. Oh my God, whoever's doing this is my new hero. So where we study is based off of San Juan Island, which you can see in the middle of the screen here and in the middle of our study area. We do go all the way up to the Fraser River, which is really important for this population of whales. This is why we used to have whales here all the time, because there used to be a lot of fish going up the, going up the Fraser River. I'm not doing this highlighting, just so that you guys know. This is all a surprise. So I'm liking it so far. So whoever's doing it, keep it up.
If we could not do the drawing on the screen, that would be great, guys.
I don't mind, actually. It's moving along fairly well. So I just need to get used to it. There are 74 animals in the population is all. Yes, and back to the Fraser River, there used to be a lot of fish going up the Fraser River. Not so much now. And so we're not, as a result of that, we're not seeing the whales come into the inland waters as much as we used to. I'm going to move on from there. So as I said, there are just 74 individuals in the population at this point, which is about half of the amount of animals that we really should have. It was known early on that these whales were threatened. And in 2005, our federal government in this country listed them under the Endangered Species Act because there were a lot of different threats facing this population, and their population was declining very significantly. So most importantly, we have the lack of quality and quantity prey, mostly Chinook salmon, that is, again, as I said before, lacking in the region that these whales are occurring. On top of that, the whales live in very polluted waters. And so when there's a lot of pollution in the water, there is a thing called bioaccumulation of toxicants. And essentially when small animals eat or just are in the water with a lot of toxicants, they take in those toxins. And then when something bigger eats them, all the toxins that first animal ate gets stored in the bigger animal and all the way up the food chain to the point where you get a very large fatty animal, hopefully fatty animal. You always want to see a fat whale. But the downside of that is that they end up getting a lot of toxicants in their blubber. And then the fact that we have a lot of ships and small boats in the water with these animals adds to the threat. So the more boats and I'm sorry,
Also,
stop working on the screen because now I'm just wanting to see what you're going to put on there and I'm not paying attention to what I'm seeing. So if you
could anyone who's drawing on it please stop, because it's kind of annoying and distracting.
It is. Thank you. I very much liked it to begin with, and I'll have to, whoever's doing that, I'll have to learn how to do that. Anyhow, these whales, of all the threats that are facing them, the biggest threat is the lack of prey. These whales co-evolved with very, very large Chinook salmon over the course of hundreds of thousands of years. The fish-eating killer whales co-evolved with this with salmon that were this big, sometimes this big, depending on what river. These fish, the one on the right of your screen is, pardon me, the one on the left of your screen was 116 pounds, way more than most of you weigh. The one on the left for your screen, 121 pounds. Just humongous fish. And so for a whale that needs to eat somewhere around 300 to 400 pounds of food per day, depending on how big the animal is, how old the animal is, these whales would have had to have only caught maybe 3 or 4 of these in a day to have enough food to maintain their optimal health. Now we know from, I looked it up fairly recently, the average Chinook salmon in Puget Sound in the state of Washington, right here in the Salish Sea, is about 12 to 15 pounds. So the number of fish that the whales have to catch and eat to get up to that 300 to 400 pounds per day is significantly more. And the whales are expending just as much energy to find those fewer fish that are less quality, smaller fish. I work under this, under the direction of Dr. Sam Wasser. He started studying endangered species on land back in 1997. He had this idea to collect poop from different animals in order to non-invasively study animals that were threatened and not bother them by collecting their fecal samples. So this is a non-invasive way to collect samples from an animal and be able to study them and study just a tremendous amount of information that can be gathered with just by looking at one fecal sample. So this is Sam in the field collecting, I think it was wolf scat that he was collecting several years ago. So we do our work and we are able to do this non-invasively by using dogs. Dogs have a sense of smell that's hundreds and hundreds of times better than our human sense of smell. It was once described to me as that a dog can smell a teaspoon of sugar in two Olympic-sized swimming pools, which is just an incredible feat for these dogs. Dogs are now being used to sniff out disease like COVID. Their detection rate is as high as 93%, which is really amazing. Dogs have been put to use to find any number of things that you can imagine. And so Sam, Dr. Wasser had this idea to use dogs and their sense of smell in order to study endangered species. These 6 dogs here represent our current dogs with the Center for Conservation Biology, Conservation Canines. And we've had, I think, about 35 total in our program throughout the year, throughout the years. So Eva is the most recent whale dog for our program. She does have an Instagram account and a Facebook account and soon a Twitter account. I just need to learn how to be more technologically advanced to be able to do all of that social media. She's an amazing dog. She was my dog, my private dog, before she got trained to be a whale scat dog. And she learned how to do this in about a week. Whoop, went the wrong way. So I've already touched on this a little bit. We use dogs because we can collect them non-invasively. We don't have to be anywhere near the animal. For whales, we can be up to a mile away from them. And for land animals, the dogs can find scat samples that are even frozen in several feet of snow, even months after the animal has left the area. So our whale scat dogs we've had a total of 5 here, 3 of them. And we use scat dogs, we use rescue dogs because these are dogs that tend to be given to shelters because they don't, until you give these kinds of dogs a job, sometimes they don't make great companion animals. These are dogs that would, in some cases, rather just play with their toy versus say eat their dinner or even be pet by their people. But once you find these dogs, these very, very ball-driven, play-driven dogs, and put them to work, they just end up making tremendously wonderful companion animals or pets. Again, as I said, Eva was my companion animal before she got trained, and so I'm just really fortunate to get to work with my dog. So this is how it works. A whale group is going by, or an individual whale is swimming through the environment. Remember that this is a watery world, so it's very dynamic. The water moves, we've got tides and currents coming in and moving the sample. But we just imagine that whales are moving in a direction, let's say from the left hand of your screen towards the right hand side of your screen. And imagine that the wind is coming from the top of your screen down towards the keyboard or towards the floor. And the water, say, is moving in the opposite direction. This is in a perfect case scenario. And they poop, because that's a perfect case scenario. Everybody loves a pooping whale. And then we come along, and our job, my job formerly as the boat driver, was to operate the boat downwind of where the whales may have left us a sample. and we move the boat at a 90-degree angle from where the wind is coming from. And that allows the scent cone from the poop to come up from the water and move across the landscape with the wind down towards where our boat is operated. And you can see this picture down at the bottom here with Tucker, our first whale scat dog, on the front with his handler, Liz Seeley. This was back in about 2013. And he's leaning way over the front of the boat. And this tells us by his body language that he is on a scent. And when that happens, we start paying very close attention to what his body language is doing. And as we pass into the scent cone, he will have a change of behavior that reacts in a way to tell us to move into, to turn the boat into the wind. And ultimately, this zigzagging behavior of moving from the bow of the boat to the side of the boat, from the bow of the boat to the side of the boat, tells us which direction to be pointing the boat. And amazingly, again, we can find these samples that are up to a mile away from where we start off trying to find them downwind of that area. So this is what the dogs look like when they're just on a scent or searching for a scent, laying, just standing with all four legs on the bow, and just hanging out there really. And then when they have a change of behavior because they smell a scent, their body changes completely. One of Eba's tells is that she gets up on the bow with her front feet, and she'll start trying to walk forward on the boat. So her back feet are kind of walking forward with just, it's kind of adorable to watch. And also her tail starts wagging. Sometimes she starts whimpering, and then she'll start licking her lips or licking the air. And really that's her telling us like, it's that way, keep going towards where my nose is pointing. And amazingly, it works. And in an ideal world, we end up finding samples like this. This year, we were fortunate to find some rather large samples. In the past couple of years, since 2013 through 2019, the whales were just finding we were finding very small fecal samples from these whales. And that was because they're just, you know, it's like us. If we don't get enough to eat, we don't really have enough to poop out. We want to be seeing these whales eating every day and pooping every day. And this year, like I say, in 2020, the few days that we were able to get out there, we did find some fairly big samples, not quite this big, but bigger than what we have been finding, which were more kind of like this size where my cursor is moving on the screen. The bigger the sample, that means that they have a lot of material to let go. If they're not getting enough to eat, their body utilizes absolutely everything that they've eaten and they don't poop out very much. Or their poop is like diarrhea, and that's not great either. So this is what Eba looks like. This is what Eba is working for, are moments like this.
Get it, Eba, get it. Good job. Girl.
So when we collect it using these scoops, and we just scoop the sample right out of the water. And then I do check it out to make sure that that's exactly what we got. Because sometimes there might be other things floating in the water near to where the sample is. So we want to make sure that the actual sample has been collected. And then we put it in tubes like is shown down here in my hands. And then we take those tubes and we put it in a machine on the boat called a centrifuge, which spins really, really fast. And essentially what that does is it pulls the matter, the poop, down to the bottom, very bottom of the tube, and separates the ocean water from the poop. And then we separate that water out in order to be able to freeze it without that water, because we have learned that when we leave seawater on the sample, it does draw off some of the hormones that we want to be able to analyze later in the lab. So this list here is a list of some of the things that we can study by looking at fecal samples, So if the fecal sample is big enough, we can actually look at every single one of these different variables or different questions. And so we think of poop as being a gold mine. So the bigger the poop, the bigger the gold mine, and the more questions we can answer. So one of the other things I just wanted to very quickly give
I have a question.
An idea of some of the other things that can be done, the other research that's being done and that I've been a part of in the past. This is a suction cup that gets stuck on the tag, and Dr. Tennyson and her children are on this Zoom as well. She's been a big participant in this project, helping us analyze a tremendous amount of the data that comes off of these tags. These tags stick onto the whale, and the tag itself captures a tremendous amount of information like dive depth and speed and pitch and roll, how the whale is moving underwater. But most importantly is the audio. So what is the acoustic environment that these whales are living in? And so this is an example of a dive profile that one of these whales was on. I think I'm going to skip through this just to make sure that we have enough time to have questions. This is a different type of tag which they're not using anymore, that shows where the whales go, and this is why we can see that they go all the way down to California, and why it's so important for us to be protecting habitat along the coast. And this idea is under review by the federal government right now to extend the whale's critical habitat all the way down to Monterey. We are trying to now collect transient samples, fecal samples from the mammal-eating killer whales. We did collect this monster of a sample. I have no idea what this is. I actually don't know if this is something that the whale threw up or if it came out the other end and the whale pooped it out. Not sure yet, but we're sure looking forward to finding out. And then we're also collecting baleen whale fecal samples. So humpbacks are on the increase in these waters. And we were successful last year collecting our first fecal sample on a humpback. There's Eva on the front of the boat and Dr. Wasser handling or being her dog observer, looking for her change of behavior. This is just a funny graphic that I like a lot. And thankfully, we can stay a lot farther away from the animals than this graphic shows us. But this is what humpback poop looks like when it's floating on the water. Now, humpbacks in this region eat a variety of different things. They eat krill, which is what this poop sample is made up of, which are the tiniest of the animals that live in the water column. And being a baleen whale, humpbacks filter out the water and save back the protein, the animals. And this is what a poop from krill looks like. They also eat small little forage fish like sand lance and surf smelt and some herring, things like that. And I don't have a picture in here, but we did get one of those last year as well. And that was more like just kind of a brown, kind of more like a southern resident sample, not kind of pretty like this, pretty pink. This looks like a Monet painting to me. You should look up Monet if you don't know who Monet is. Eva got her reward on that first sample. She's the one that told us that whale had pooped amazingly because she had never had a fecal sample from a humpback to get trained on, but she knew something was different and reacted to it. So this is us processing that big sample, and that's a whole tube full of it. We got 10 of those tubes. 10 of these tubes, and then some other smaller ones that we saved as well last year. She was featured during this fecal sample collection. We did have some filmmakers from Netflix on board, and there was a documentary called Connected, and Eva is featured in the second episode of that. It's called Poop. What else? And so you can look at that if you're interested. And we are also hoping, with the help of Cindy Hansen from Orca Network, she is my partner in crime on this, and the the Whale Scat Project from University of Washington. We're hoping to get down to the Whidbey Island area closer to Langley, at some point, as soon as COVID will allow us to collect fecal samples on the gray whales that are known to forage down there. And lastly, we did have 2 other shows where Eva was featured this last year. Sorry, my 2 documentary slides were out of order there. I wanted to put them together. But she was featured on a Disney Plus program called It's a Dog's Life. She was on the first episode of that. That was really fun, shown at the beginning of this year. And then most recently, she was on a new program that's on PBS. And that one is called The Age of Nature. And she's in the 2nd episode of that one. So all 3 of these documentaries came out in 2020. So we were able to highlight the work that we're doing to a broader audience, much like this evening today is allowing me to talk about the program. So I always want to give a shout out to the people that help make this work happen, our field crew and our volunteers, and down here, our team at Pack Forest. This is our team that helps train our dogs, whether for on the water or in the terrestrial realm. And also, obviously, always wanting to thank our funders. And so with that, I think I'll end the program and answer questions if anybody has any.
I have one. Kepler.
Okay.
My question is, once you have the poop, the sample, with all the water gone, you head back to the lab, or the dock, get off, go to the lab. What do you do with the poop then? Once you're in the lab?
Yeah, so we actually put it in an ice chest on the boat. After we pour off the water, we put it in an ice chest with what we call wet ice. So just ice packs, basically. Wet ice as opposed to dry ice, which is very cold. That's hard to get. So we use wet ice. And then it goes from there to a very, very cold freezer here on San Juan Island until it can be taken to Dr. Wasser's lab on the main campus in Seattle. And then from there, our lab technicians in Seattle do all of the analysis at that point. So we have
I live in Seattle.
Yeah.
Yeah, what they probably do is they take out the DNA of the poop, analyze it through some sort of computer, find out what its properties are, and then we can find out much more about the whales who pooped it.
That's exactly right. So if you think back to that long list of things that we, the variables that we look at, so DNA absolutely is one of them. We can tell who the whale was that pooped out the sample for us. If it's a female, we can tell if she's pregnant, and if she's pregnant, how pregnant, which is pretty amazing. We can tell if they're getting enough to eat, so what their nutritional status is like. We can also tell things like if they have bacteria or some worms. We've found worms in the past. Really, the list just goes on and on about what you can tell from one fecal
Whales
sample.
eat worms? Whales eat worms?
They don't eat worms. No, they have worms in their intestinal tract. And usually if it's a healthy enough whale, that's not a problem. But if they're not getting enough to eat and their nutrition overall and their health declines, then worms can become overabundant in their intestinal tract, and that can cause problems.
Okay, so
plastics. We're looking at microplastics now too.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so for the rest of the questions, I'm going to call on you and then lower your hand so that we're not talking over each other. So don't unmute yourself until I call on you. And I wanted to hit this one question that was in the chat before we finished. And it says, can you describe the difference in smell and appearance in transient and resident killer whales?
So I wish that I could talk about transient killer whale poop more than I can. I was on board in 2010, I believe it was, with the NOAA crew, so Dr. Brad Hansen and Candace Emmons, when we did collect for sure a transient killer whale poop. It was about this big, so the size of I don't know how big that is. And it was a 90% or so hair from a stellar sea lion and about 10% just some goopy stuff. I'm not really sure what it was. My memory of that was that there was no smell to that. That red blob that I showed you that was from the Transient, our dog hit on that, as I said. So it had something kind of quintessentially killer whale about it, but it did not smell like a regular sample that I'm used to smelling from a fish-eating killer whale, which just honestly is not that bad of a smell. It smells like slightly old fish, which kind of technically it is, right? Because it's fish going in and fish coming out. But it's not bad. It's not collecting whale, fish-eating killer whale poop is not bad. I will say that the humpback poop was super stinky. I don't even really know how to describe it. Just like really bad. Yeah. I prefer the southern resident fish eating killer whale poop, the bouquet.
I would too. Probably I would do that. Probably it smells.
Kepler.
Probably it smells like half as big as the cup.
Okay. We have lots of kids with their hands up, and I want to give everybody a chance to answer them. So I'm going to go to Delia right now. Are you ready to ask your question?
Yes. How long does it take for whale poop to decompose?
Well, so we know that it depends on what the fecal sample is made up of. So if they're getting enough to eat, I'm guessing that you're talking about like on the water. How long will it stay on the water?
Yes.
Okay, so if they're getting enough to eat and they end up pooping out those really nice fatty samples like I showed in that picture with the 3 different types, those samples can float on the water, assuming the water is not very turbulent. Those samples can float on the water for 35 or 45 minutes or even more.
Wow.
Time frame, yeah. The longest time frame that we have had is 45 minutes. And I know that because the whales had exited this pass called active pass 45 minutes prior to when we entered the pass. And as soon as we entered the pass, it's a fairly narrow pass between 2 islands. Our dog had a change of behavior and we were like, what the heck? There's not even any whales here. And sure enough, we followed him and he took us to a sample that had actually kind of got stuck in this really nice eddy where the water was just going round and round kind of gently. And it entrained the fecal sample there so that it didn't sink. And it was a really fatty, super stinky sample. And so that's how I know at least 45 minutes, possibly more. Now, that being said, the opposite of that is if they're not getting enough to eat, their fecal samples are very watery and diffuse, like I said, more like diarrhea, and that goes away really quickly. It disperses in the water very quickly. If we're fairly close in time and in space to that sample, sometimes our dogs can smell it. Sometimes we can even smell it, but we loop around and around and around in the area and we just can't find it. And that's what tells us that it was one of those watery samples and it went away really quickly.
Okay, thank you.
That was a good question, Delia. So I'm going to go to Finn, Reese, and Ara. Are you ready?
Well, Finn, Reese, and Era, but I was gonna say, I'm not sure if you can answer this, but my question is, who poops more? Who poops out more, a humpback whale or like an elephant?
Again, that's going to be depending on what they had for that meal. But I've never been around elephant poop except in a zoo. So I can't say for sure for say wild elephants, but when I compare my personal experience of humpback poop versus the elephant poop that I have seen, humpbacks by far like 3 times as much. And it's you know, it's hard. Like if I was to be able to collect it all into a mass like an elephant poop, that might be a better way to know for sure. But with a whale, of course, like the whale is swimming along and it's pooping at the same time, and then the water's also moving and dispersing that sample. So the sample is really, and can, at least the one that we got, that pink crow one, was really largely distributed, widely distributed throughout the top of the water. So that it's a little, I'm not sure if I answered. I wish I had more experience with the humpback poop, but so far we've just found the one krill based poop and the one forage fish based poop. And I will tell you that the forage fish one was tiny, was teeny tiny, like maybe, oh, I don't know, like a couple of Ritz crackers worth, you know, like that, like a little pile of lentils for a huge humpback. So I think it depends on how much they're eating and if it's maybe their first poop of the day. I don't know, I made that part up, but it kind of stands to reason. They're mammals. You know, these whales are mammals like we are. So they're eating and pooping, you know, the more in, the more out in an ideal situation.
All right, so I'm going to go to Paul next. It looks like you had a question.
Right. So why exactly does whale poop look like the way it looks like?
Yeah, so it's absolutely what they're eating. So the krill is pink because I mean the poop from that humpback, it was pink because the krill are pink. So what they're eating is pink. With the but then with a southern resident killer whale, you saw on that one photo that I showed, there were 3 really different looking poop samples. So with the southern residents, for example, oh gosh, I wish I had time to bring up other pictures of poop. I should just have a poop file handy. We'll do that. One of the samples that we collected this year from the southern resident fish-eating killer whales was really wild. It was unlike anything we've ever collected before. And quite honestly, it did not smell like a regular sample of say a salmon sample. And this one was really dark and it had this really crazy oil at the top of it. Like after we spun it down in the centrifuge, instead of pulling the water to the top of the vial, it ended up separating this oil that was in the sample to the top of the vial. And what we think, our working hypothesis right now is that that sample came from a meal based on possibly cod, which is a very, very oily fish. And so we're going to have to wait till we get the analysis back from the lab. But so to answer your question with regard to fish eating killer whales, it can be very different depending on what they're eating. It can be pink or red or brown or green.
So if it eats a silverhead salmon, does that mean that it'll be silver? Oh wait, or is it based on the color of the inside of the meat of the inside of the fish instead of the outside?
Yeah, so we just don't have, unfortunately, we don't have enough samples from poops that are made up of other species going in yet. So we're still working on that. Check back with me in a few years and I might be able to answer that better.
Okay.
Thank you for the question.
Yes, good question. Now we're going to go to Elena.
You told us that pollution is bad for whales, but like depending on the size of whale, how fast can pollution go through their bodies?
Oh, good question. That's another one of those tough questions because it depends on what the pollution is, what the chemical is, and how much the whales are eating.
I mean like the trash or smoke.
Oh, so I don't have an answer to that question actually. smoke is something that we were thinking about and wanting to get some samples when the whales were living through those really, really smoky days up here in August and September. So a couple things. When we haven't gotten the analysis back from the poop that we collected during that time. So I don't have an answer for you yet. What I can tell you is that when we did do a study, and the findings are available from the author's name is Lundin, Jessica Lundin, Lundin, if you want to look her up. She looked at something called PAH, which for ease, I'll just explain as being the pollution that comes off of boats. And that is a pollutant that does not bioaccumulate in the whale's blubber like other toxicants do. And those samples, that's pretty much within that whole cycle of, so we think that that the whales metabolize a meal in about 12 hours, something like that, again, depending on when they ate last and when they, and how much they ate. Some things can go through their system fairly quickly, and some things go through their system, it takes more time. So I know that's not a very good answer. If it's a toxicant that gets bioaccumulated in their fat, that could take maybe never to be released if they're getting enough to eat from then on. But if they go through these periods of not getting enough to eat and then getting some more to eat and then getting not enough to eat, they're metabolizing that blubber. And so those toxicants that they ate some time ago, you know, it could be years prior, start getting circulated. So it depends. It's not a great answer, but it says it's a complicated answer. Great question.
Oh, these are all good questions. Let's go to Luca, Lena, Tara, and Una. And sorry if I mispronounced names, guys.
You actually did better than most people.
All right.
My question is, I thought orcas were actually dolphins, not whales.
They are dolphins. They're in the dolphin family. The way that I think about whales and dolphins is that functionally they're basically the same. It's like a ship and a boat. There are differences between ships and boats, but functionally they're about the same sort of animal. That's how I think about dolphins and whales. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but generally, taxonomy is a very funny thing. They're dolphins because they're most closely related.
They're cousins. They're cousins, basically.
Was that it? Okay. So the next question, I accidentally unraised your hand, Ben, but let's go ahead and let you go. Ben and Liam.
Do you do porpoises?
We don't collect samples on porpoises. We do have 2 porpoise species here in the Salish Sea, Dall's porpoise and harbor porpoise. From what I understand from people that study them a little bit more, first off, they move really quick through the water. So when they poop, the poop, you know, it'd be very hard to catch that. So we've never seen a porpoise poop. That being said, we don't spend a lot of time with porpoise. So maybe if we spent a bit more time, we would see it. But people that do spend a fair amount of time with porpoises have not seen it, to my knowledge. I'd like to, though.
We have a question from the chat here. What is the turnaround time on samples from collection to data?
Oh boy, that depends on a number of things. Number 1 is funding, and number 2 is lab technicians. So we are very lucky now to have a new graduate student working with us. His name is Will Sano, and his specialty, what he's very interested in, is the gut biome, the microbiome of the gut. And so he's going to be looking at all of our samples for to figure out what's happening in the gut, to say, because what we now know that our stomachs and our intestinal tracts are like our second brain. It's very important to have healthy gut biome. And so he's going to be looking at that. So because he's there, and now with COVID, well, now right now in the next 4 weeks, I'm not sure, but He was kept out of the lab for safety reasons early on in the year. He's been in the lab quite a bit. So the short answer is I'm hoping to get samples, the analysis back from the 2019 and 2020 relatively quickly, say by May of next year is what our goal is.
Awesome. So we have Ida next.
I have a question, and my question is, if orcas are in the dolphin family, and I know orcas are in the dolphin family, what's the difference between dolphin poop and orca poop?
So this is, yeah, this question about, you know, some people call them southern resident orca, for example. Some people call them southern resident killer whales. These are just names. So let's kind of put that part of it aside. I call them southern resident killer whales because mostly scientists do. I also call them orca sometimes. But so names aside, if you're asking me to tell you the difference between, say, like a bottlenose dolphin and a orca killer whale who's in the dolphin family, I wish I could answer you that too. I've never seen something like a bottlenose dolphin poop. I think it would go back to what they're eating. There is like, for example, when I was mentioning that transient killer whale or that mammal eating killer whale poop, I would never expect to see hair, for example, in a fecal sample from a fish eating killer whale. Whereas that mammal eating killer whale poop sample that we collected was almost entirely made up of hair. And so it goes back to what the animal is eating that will help you decide or make a prediction about what their poop might look like. Does that answer your question?
And then Amelia's been waiting with her hand up, so let's give her a chance. Are you still there, Amelia?
Yep.
Your turn. Thanks for being patient.
Yeah. So I kind of had a question. Is there like a difference between a baby orca's poop and a full-grown orca poop? And like how can you tell the difference?
That is a great question, and I'm pretty sure that we have collected baby poop before. And what I need to do is absolutely verify that. You can just shut the door if you want. It smells a lot different. It smells milky. We've also collected baby regurgitation, so like a little bit of maybe like a burp or a little throw up or something. And those tend to be like kind of like cottage cheesy. So I do need to confirm that the milky smelling poop was from a baby, but I would lay heavy odds that that's what those ended up being.
Okay.
Oh, look who's here. Well, I don't see any more questions.
I just want to say hi to Eva and Giles. I missed you earlier. Hi.
Oh, yay.
Lisa.
There's Eva.
Hi, Eva.
Eva.
Remy, are you raising your hand? Do you have a question? Yeah? Do you know how to, here, let me find you and unmute, yeah.
Someone's asking how old is Eva?
Such a cute puppy.
What's that?
How old is Eva?
We think that Eva is going to be 6 in January. Stop.
All right, Remy, did you have a question?
And Kai.
You're saying hi?
No, Kai. Hi, Kai. Go ahead.
Hi. You're Kai.
if you catch poop in the winter or summer.
I'd love to be able to catch the poop in the winter time, but the whales are not near where we work much in the winter time. That being said, we did collect some in the very, very early spring, like in February of this year. And that was really great. That was the earliest sample that we got. Usually in the winter time, the whales are on the outer coast, like more along the west coast of Washington and Oregon. And the water is really choppy out there during the winter time. So it is hard to collect. We do have some colleagues that work for the federal government that have been able to get some samples in the winter, but mostly samples get collected during the spring and summer and early fall. Hey, Finn, I see your dog. Oh, yay.
Nice. Yeah, you're welcome to share your dogs here if you've got a dog hanging around close by.
I would love to see dogs. Oh my goodness. Oh, look at that.
Here's a little one.
Oh,
This one's Paul.
When is the meeting gonna be over? When is the meeting gonna be over?
I don't know.
When everybody's got their questions answered. Do you have another question, Kepler?
No,
Oh, okay.
but if I do think of one, then I'll tell you.
Okay.
Hi, Charlie, you can go ahead.
I know that they don't do the collecting, but am I allowed to show my cat?
Yes.
of course. We have cat lovers here and dogs.
I'm going to say goodbye because I've been here for a little bit, so I'm gonna leave. Bye.
Thanks for joining. We'll see you next time. Well, there's the cat, Charlie's cat.
Oh, so nice.
Okay. She does not like being picked up a lot.
My cat looks a lot like that too, Charlie. Gray stripey, I love him.
It's a her.
Her. Mine's a him. Cindy, you got kittens at your house?
No, I don't have any kittens. I'm trying to get my parents to let me have another cat because Gita gets pretty lonely when I'm at school.
Oh.
Like I don't like for when I get back to school, I was thinking she might want a playmate.
Eva looks pretty content there.
Oh, I see another cat.
Tabby. Oh my goodness.
Aw,
Kitty.
that's a nice,
Lovely.
that orangey
Thank
cat.
you.
Oh, how pretty.
Eric, what's your cat's name?
This is Little T.
Little T.
Hi.
Oh, there's Susan's cat. Susan's
you.
dog, Briar.
Oh, Briar.
Briar just got back from doggy physical therapy.
Hi, Giles.
Hi, Susan. How fantastic. What fun.
Anybody have any last minute questions? Those were some really good questions.
Really great.
I hope you were prepared for those tough questions from the kiddos.
Yeah, those were great. Amelia, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just have one more. Do you guys ever see like a whale, do you ever see like a whale pass you by while pooping? Do you ever see that?
A what? A wild whale.
Yeah. Sometimes it happens. It's very frustrating when that happens. And we're not prepared because sometimes we can't get back to it fast enough. But yeah, it's pretty much the worst thing ever. We had a drone operator on our boat in 2019. He works for the Center for Whale Research, and he was on our boat for this summer. And 2 times he got over minke whales, which are a different type of baleen whale. And those guys pooped 2 times, and it dissipated so fast that we couldn't get to it. That was very frustrating because we had never gotten minke whale poop before, not yet. Is that it?
I think that might be it. Well, thank you so much, Giles.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for
Yes,
having
we
me.
really appreciate it.
Everybody enjoyed
Oh,
it.
There's Cindy. Cindy.
Cindy,
It's so big.
G. Foster,
Oh my God.
Oh my goodness, she has 2 kitties.
and she bottle feeds her kittens and then adopts them out.
Wonderful.
Yeah, they're so cute.
Okay, everyone, thanks for coming.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you, Giles.
Thanks.
Thank you, Eva.
Thanks, Giles.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody.
Hi, Finn and Desiree, if you're still there. Hi.